Have y'all heard of a man named Edward Bernays? And I'm going somewhere with this, so just follow me. I'm going somewhere with this. Have you heard of a man named Edward Bernays? Edward Bernays is considered the father of public relations globally, but he started it in America. He was born in Germany, but he came to America when he was 1 year old, when he was a 1 year old baby. Listen, or 1 or 2 years old, right? Listen, he's considered the father of public relations. It was called public relations back then. Now we call it marketing or propaganda. He's the father of that. What we now recognize as social engineering, it comes from him. Direct, like the line is straight from this man, Edward Bernays. Remember a few episodes ago, I said America's issue is that our smartest people use their genius for social engineering, for marketing, for pushing and selling things to people. It comes from this man, Edward Bernays. Started his career as a writer, but kind of transitioned into the psychological arts. You want to know who his uncle is? If you don't know, maybe you do know already. Edward Bernays' uncle, blood uncle, is Sigmund Freud. Actually, it's considered his double uncle. It's his mom. Edward Bernays' mom is Sigmund Freud's sister, and Edward Bernays' dad is like married to one of Sigmund Freud's other sisters. Like it's some crazy stuff going on. It's like it's his uncle two ways, like that. If you don't know who Sigmund Freud is, now Sigmund Freud is considered the father of, or the inventor of, psychoanalysis. He's like a super neurologist and super psychologist. He's like the beginning of modern, what we know as modern psychology, right? Pretty much they use his word as, for a long time, to use what he's German and grew up in Germany and was there, right? What Sigmund Freud did is pretty much was like the basis for a lot of people's mindsets around psychology for many, many years. Like he's the father of psychoanalysis. So his nephew, Edward Bernays, comes to America, grows up doing all this, right? Let me just skip through a lot of what I'm saying, right? His claim to fame and what made him just like an unstoppable marketing, social engineering genius is his campaign to get women to start smoking, right? So he was working for a company, one cigarette company, and then another tobacco company. He was working for one tobacco company, another one poached him and took him. The American Tobacco Company took him from his former employer, right? And they tasked him with, yo, we need you to get women to smoke our cigarettes. Our cigarettes are called Lucky Strike. We need you to get women to smoke our cigarettes, right? So Edward Bernays gets in his, whatever, I don't know what type of bag he was in, but he figured it out. So he figured out a way, you know what? I'm going to get women to smoke cigarettes by attaching cigarette smoking to the feminist movement. So now women will see cigarette use as a sign of freedom and like taking our power back. And so it worked pretty much. I'm giving a long story short, but it worked. Then he said like, yeah, but women are okay smoking now, but now they won't buy Lucky Strike specifically because it has green packaging and women don't associate green with women. So like green is like a man color at that time, probably because of the military, but green is considered a man color at that time. So women won't buy this brand of cigarette. So he was tasked with, yo, fix this. He was tasked with fixing that. So then he came up with this thing called the Green Ball. The Green Ball was just like a big party where there was going to be like the Met Gala, but of the 1920s or 1930s, whatever. Pretty much we was going to theme this thing green, and we were going to get all the most prominent women around the country, and they were going to come to this thing and wear green. We were going to get all the good fashion designers to design them dresses and all that type of stuff. So he did that. And from there, once all these companies started to make green clothing to promote this green ball thing for women, now all of a sudden he like changed the zeitgeist of women around the color green. And now they seen green as this can be a feminine color too. And because we think green can be a feminine color, now we'll buy Lucky Strike cigarettes. I mean, this nigga was crazy. You see what I'm saying? He was a genius social engineer. Like we talking about like nowadays we can like draw direct lines to stuff like that because we have many years of the people who did it before us. We could see how marketing works and stuff like that. But when he was doing it in the 1920s and the 30s, it didn't exist before that. That wasn't how things were marketed. You see what I'm saying? He put together a green ball to trick women into thinking green can be a woman's color just so they would buy a cigarette. Think about the type of brain that has to come from somebody that's playing like that, right? Now, the reason I wanted to talk about Edward Bernays is because Edward Bernays did not only work in the private public business sector, he also worked in the government sector. And the reason I'm bringing that up, this is a long way to get to where I'm getting to, because I feel like his work and influence may have directly influenced what we've seen when it comes to crack and drug use as a whole in the black community. Let me draw a line, right? And of course, now a lot of times you might see me get into my facts. This one is theory. This is a theory I have right here, right? Because to me, when I look at how crack use hit the community, it feels very social engineering. It feels like somebody with a brain like that has to be responsible for this. If it's not him that's responsible for it, it's somebody that learned from him. And also he has a history of working with the CIA. Edward Bernays has worked with the CIA before. So either it was him or it was somebody that came up from under him. Okay. Let me say this also. This dude was such a deadly marketer and such a deadly public relations and propaganda guru. When the companies would hire him, they didn't want the public to know that they had hired him, because then they would know our mind is being played with. Like something is going on. That's how deadly he was with what he was doing. Like he was serious. So let me fast forward to crack. So, excuse me. For many years, we have heard this thing of, crack is the poor man drug, cocaine, as a rich man high or whatever right there, right? There was this thing, right? And to me, I felt like that was always like a disrespectful thing to say about black people. Not always, but I'm saying like the last like 5-6 years, I felt like that was disrespectful because it makes that tricks the mind into thinking black people wanted to get high. We just didn't have anything to get high with because we couldn't afford to get high. That's what that says. That's what that does to the mind when you say like that was for rich people and this thing is more affordable. So it makes you sit like black people were sitting around looking for something to get high with, right? But one thing and this is how you can tell like propaganda is in play. When people start to say stuff and when you break it down, it doesn't make sense. Y'all realize that heroin hit the scene before crack did, right? And you realize heroin was big in America before crack was, or before cocaine, I mean, right? Heroin costs more than cocaine, right? It does. It costs way more than cocaine. And black people in that time period used heroin. Nobody ever says black people didn't use heroin because it cost too much. Has anybody ever heard, hey, black people don't do heroin because it costs too much? Has anybody ever heard that? Tell me. You let me know. It costs way more than cocaine, by the way. Has anybody ever heard that black people don't do heroin because it costs too much? No? Okay. Well, maybe you have heard. Put it in the comments. I don't know. So if heroin costs more than cocaine and black people were doing heroin, which we see plenty of documentaries about, and especially the guys who came back from Vietnam, I mean, they was having to cope with some of the stuff they had seen. So a lot of them got involved with heroin. A lot of musicians, and not just famous musicians, a lot of people of the night world, gamblers and all that, heroin was prevalent in the communities, right? And this is dating back to the 30s. Long, like, you know what I'm saying? So if black people didn't have a problem accessing and using or doing whatever with heroin, how all of a sudden does the 70s and 80s get here and now black people all of a sudden can't afford cocaine? Where did that come from? Okay, to me, where it came from was a social engineer. Somebody knew, hey, I think they did the studies, but I don't think heroin use was ever big, like in the black community, because a lot of we just Black people, as a whole, we just don't do stuff like that, right? Because needles, like just overall, we just ain't gonna play with needles like that too much. I think they also recognize the same thing when it came to cocaine. We don't play with our nose like that too much. You're gonna get some black people that do cocaine, but for the most part, we are not a big snorting type of people. We're not big on needles. That's not us. That's more the white thing. That's more the Hispanic thing. That's more of the, the Native American thing. That's just not our thing. And I think that somebody, a social engineer, psychologist, somebody came to the table and said, hey, the best way, if we want black people to do this, we need to make it smokable. We need to figure out a smokable way to get them to do this. I think some engineers got together behind the scenes and figured out, okay, now we got this, we done cook this thing up. Now we're gonna drop it off in different pockets of the country and we're gonna see how it go. We're gonna put it in some major markets and we're gonna see how it go. And when we drop it off, tell them how to make their own version of it. Tell them how to make it so that, because we don't want to keep on having to come here to drop this off. Tell them how to make their own version of it. And then we get the ball rolling from there. And that's why a lot of arguments happen around different old heads where who had crack first. Y'all don't realize that? Just think about this. Who had crack first? They like people in New York, like, I was over here at this time. People in Oakland, like, nah, I was here at this time. People in LA, like that. People in Detroit, like, nah, they had it back then. All of these, the reason that all these people are arguing about the time in the year, was it 80? Was it 79? Was it 82? Was it this? Who got it first? Where did it come from and all that? Nobody knows where it came from because it came from some operative somewhere. We all agree on that, right? What we don't agree on is the overall mindset of how they got black people to do it. They made cocaine smokable because they know this is how we're going to market this to black people. By the time they realize, okay, we got this thing smokable, now we can put these little operatives in all these different communities, and now we're going to push it. Now we're going to push it because literally when you watch Snowfall, you see, now Snowfall is not like proof of what I'm saying right now, but it's like an Easter egg though, because when you had somebody like, when you had Franklin first come up to Jerome talking about, yeah, I got this cocaine, we could do X, Y, Z with it. But Jerome is like, nah, that's the devil right there. You don't want to mess with that young nigga. I don't want to mess with it. Like, as a matter of fact, get it away from here. Get it out of here. You about to destroy everything if you mess with that. That was like first season, I think. He told Franklin, get the hell on with that. And of course, the person being backed by the CIA decided, no, I'm going to push this thing by any means necessary. See, they tell you the story that, like, no, these black hustlers, they just had, by any means, they was down to get everybody on crack. That's how they push it. They push it like, no, by any means. Like, we're going to sell this crack by any means. But a hustler going to sell what the people want. A hustler ain't just out here about to spend all of their time trying to get you hooked to a new drug. Like, no, they just going to get the drug that you already want and sell that. You see what I'm saying? Who really, as an 18-year-old in the streets and saying like, yo, we about to manufacture and distribute a drug nobody's ever heard of, and we going to try to get everybody addicted to it. Do y'all think that's something that an 18-year-old black dude came up with? You think that's somebody was in the streets hustling and said, you know what? We're not going to sell the thing that everybody's already doing. We're going to try to find a way to get everybody hooked to something new. Why would anybody that's trying to make money in the streets do that? I mean, it worked, but I'm sure that the chances of it not working were way higher. I think it worked because there was a lot more at play, right? So I just want it to be, and then crack had there's still crack people smoking crack and all that, but I think black people quickly realized where did this come from? What is going on? Like, this is not natural. Like, this is not the way that crack exploded is not the natural progression of a drug growing in popularity. It was engineered, which is why it pretty much is dead now and is back to the drug that was popular before that, which is heroin and opioids. You see what I'm saying? Like, this whole opioid epidemic, this shit ain't new. It's been an opioid epidemic for 75 years in this country. You see what I'm saying? This crack thing came and went because people that were targeted with it quickly realized Somebody put this on us. You see what I'm saying? Somebody put this here. This wasn't natural. This wasn't from just people just want to make money. Man, listen. Y'all do a little bit of research on these people, these social engineers and all that type of stuff. I'm telling you, I think that in some decades or maybe however long, I think it's going to come out that either Edward Bernays or somebody like him was responsible for the marketing around crack and smoking cocaine. Y'all mark my words, we're going to put this on YouTube. We're going to have it up there. And when it comes out, I'm putting a name on. I'm not just saying, the CIA. I'm saying Edward Bernays specifically. That man didn't die till 1995. Y'all realize that? So he would have been around when the planning for all this shit was going on in the 70s. He would have been around. Either him or one of his minions, somebody that learned directly from him, one of his students. I'm putting it out there. I think he was responsible. By the way, when I brought up Sigmund Freud and being his uncle, the reason I brought him up is because when Edward Bernays started to go into the route of social engineering, he specifically went to Freud's work to find ways to use his studies to get people to change their behavior. He was using the psychoanalysis stuff that Sigmund Freud was doing to change people's mindsets in America around anything he wanted to. And actually, let me read this quote because this nigga was sick. Bernays was a sick nigga, man. Let me read this quote that he said. Because his first gig was like military. He was a writer, public relations writer. This is what he said. There was one basic lesson I learned in the CPI. The CPI was like the Committee of Public Information. That was pretty much like public affairs, whatever. The efforts comparable to those applied by the CPI to affect the attitudes of the enemy, of neutrals, and of people of this country could be applied with equal facility to peacetime pursuits. In other words, what could be done for a nation at war could be done for organizations and people in a nation at peace. He coined the term psychological warfare. He made it up. Essentially what he's saying is, yes, we saw how effective psychological warfare was on other countries when it's time for us to fight. We should take those same tactics and apply them to business. This man was sick. He was a genius, though, but he was sick. Genius, though. Like, I give props where it's due. I don't care if if it's ended up bad for me or not. Like when you come up with something this cold, like I got to give you your credit. He took something that they developed to use against other nations that they were warring with at that time in World War I and said, we could do this to the American public and we can make billions off of this. This make our economy $1 trillion economy. Now America's at a $20 trillion economy. Like, we can use this war stuff on the people. The words I just read that's a direct quote from Edward Bernays. Let's use this wartime stuff on the public. He came up with that.